The cold stone floor seeped through the thin material of my trousers, a constant chilling reminder of my predicament. For 3 days I had been a prisoner in the heart of the Shadowfang Pack's mountain fortress. My captor, the formidable and feared Wolf King Roman, had yet to show his face. I had only heard the whispers of his name, spoken in hushed, reverent tones by the guards who brought me my meager meals. They spoke of a ruthless leader, a warrior who had carved out his territory with blood and sheer, untamable will. My name is Amber, and I am what my own kind, the Moon Whisperers, call a psychic echo. I can absorb and redirect the energy of others, a power that has been both a blessing and a curse. It was this gift that had made me a target. My own alpha, it seemed, had bartered me away, a living weapon to be wielded by the Shadowfang King in his impending war with a rival clan. The thought sent a fresh wave of betrayal and fury through me. The heavy iron door to my cell groaned open, and 2 guards, their faces grim, stepped inside. "The king will see you now," one of them grunted, his eyes avoiding mine. Fear, a cold, sharp thing, pierced through my anger. I had no illusions about what this meeting could mean. I was a tool, a means to an end for a powerful alpha. They led me through winding stone corridors, the air growing thick with the scent of pine, damp earth, and something else. Something wild and musky that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. We entered a vast throne room, the chamber lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. And there, on a throne carved from the heart of an ancient oak, sat the savage Wolf King. Roman was even more imposing than the whispers had described. He was a mountain of a man, with broad shoulders and a chest that strained against the leather of his tunic. His dark hair was long and untamed, and his eyes, the color of molten gold, seemed to see right through me, stripping away my defenses, laying bare my very soul. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, a testament to a life of battle. He was brutal, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. The raw power that radiated from him was a tangible thing, a force that pressed in on me from all sides. My own power, my ability to echo, recoiled from the sheer dominance of his aura. He rose from his throne, his movements fluid and predatory. With each step he took towards me, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He circled me slowly, his golden eyes raking over me, assessing me as a predator would its prey. "So," his voice was a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the stone floor and up into my bones, "you are the weapon my new ally has sent me." I lifted my chin, refusing to show him the fear that threatened to consume me. "I am no one's weapon," I said, my voice shaking only slightly. A dark, dangerous smile touched his lips. "That, little one, is where you are mistaken." His proximity was overwhelming. The air crackled with a tension so thick I could taste it, a metallic tang of power and something primal, something my body responded to on a level I couldn't comprehend. As a psychic echo, I was accustomed to the energies of others, but Roman's was a maelstrom, a storm of raw, untamed masculinity that threatened to pull me under. My senses were flooded with him. The scent of the forest that clung to him, the heat that radiated from his body, the sheer, unapologetic dominance of his presence. "You will be a valuable asset in the coming conflict," he continued, his voice a silken threat. "Your abilities will give me an edge my enemies will not anticipate." "And if I refuse?" I challenged, my voice a mere whisper against the force of his will. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of his breath on my cheek. "You are not in a position to refuse. You belong to me now, a spoil of a bargain struck. Your former alpha saw you as nothing more than a commodity. I at least see your value." His words were a cruel reminder of my betrayal, but it was the possessive way he said, "You belong to me now," that sent a traitorous thrill through me. My body, it seemed, had a mind of its own, responding to his raw power with a flicker of heat that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with a dangerous, burgeoning desire. Over the next few days I was moved from the dungeon to a chamber in the upper levels of the fortress. It was a gilded cage with a soft bed and a window that overlooked a vast, untamed forest. But it was a cage nonetheless. Roman visited me daily, his presence a constant, unsettling force in my life. He would question me about my abilities, his gaze intense and unwavering. I gave him short, clipped answers, refusing to give him the satisfaction of my full cooperation. But with each visit the war within me raged. My mind screamed at me to resist, to fight against this savage king who saw me as nothing more than a tool. But my body betrayed me at every turn. A simple brush of his hand as he reached for a map would send sparks of electricity through my veins. The low growl of his voice would cause a delicious shiver to dance down my spine. I was becoming acutely aware of him as a man, a powerful, dangerously attractive man, and the realization terrified me. I had spent my life shielding myself from the overwhelming emotions of others, but with Roman, it was a battle I was losing. His desires, his passions, his fierce protectiveness over his pack, they all bled into me, amplified and echoed back at him in a dangerous feedback loop. And beneath it all, I could feel the stirrings of his own primal desire, a desire that was directed solely at me. It was a heady, intoxicating feeling, one that I was finding increasingly difficult to resist. I was his captive, a weapon in his arsenal, but with every passing moment, my body was surrendering to the savage Wolf King's claim. Chapter 3. The training began the next morning. Roman's approach was as relentless and uncompromising as the man himself. He didn't coddle or coax, he commanded. He led me to a secluded courtyard carved from the mountain's peak, a place where the wind howled a lonely song and the sky felt close enough to touch. The air was thin and sharp, biting at my exposed skin, but it was the raw, untamed energy of the Wolf King that truly stole my breath. He stood before me, stripped to the waist despite the cold, his chest a formidable landscape of muscle and scars. The intricate tattoos that snaked over his arms and across his back seemed to writhe in the pale morning light. "Your power is a reflection," he stated, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. "You absorb and redirect. It is a passive skill. I will teach you to make it a weapon. You will learn to pull, to take, to be an active force." He motioned to one of his warriors, a hulking male named Kale who eyed me with a mixture of suspicion and pity. "Kale will focus his energy, his strength. You will draw it from him and hold it within yourself. Do not release it. Contain it." The idea was terrifying. I had only ever acted as a conduit, a brief vessel for energy that flowed through me. To actively pull it, to hold the raw life force of a werewolf inside my own body, felt like a violation. It felt like trying to capture lightning in a bottle. I can't," I stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Roman closed the distance between us in 2 long, predatory strides. His shadow fell over me, and his heat was a palpable wall I couldn't escape. He grabbed my arm, his grip hard as iron, yet a traitorous current of fire shot up my limb at his touch. "You will not speak those words in my presence again," he growled, his golden eyes flashing with impatience. "You are a moon whisperer," one of the most powerful lines. "Do not dishonor your blood with cowardice." He positioned himself behind me, his massive chest pressing against my back. My entire body went rigid. I was enveloped by him, by his scent of pine and musk, by the sheer overwhelming force of his being. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his solid form. He placed his large hands over mine, raising them to face Kale. "Close your eyes," he commanded, his breath hot against my ear. "Feel the energy radiating from him. It is a current in the air, a river of power. Reach out, not with your hands but with your will. Find the source and pull." I did as he said, my fear warring with a strange, inexplicable trust in the man holding me captive. I focused, pushing past the deafening roar of Roman's own aura and seeking the quieter, yet still potent energy of Kale. I found it, a steady, humming warmth. Hesitantly, I tugged at it with my mind. It was like pulling against a firmly rooted tree. "Harder." Roman's voice was a low growl in my ear, sending shivers cascading down my spine. "Do not ask for it. Take it. It is yours." His will bolstered mine. I yanked, a silent, psychic scream of effort. A trickle of Kale's strength flowed into me. It was warm, vibrant, and utterly alien. Felt like swallowing fire. I gasped, my body trembling. Kale grunted, staggering a step. "Good," Roman murmured, his hands tightening on mine. "Again. Take more." For the next hour he pushed me relentlessly. I pulled Kale's energy until the warrior was pale and sweating, and I felt like a vessel filled to bursting. The foreign power thrummed beneath my skin, making my muscles ache and my head spin. I was a live wire, crackling with stolen strength. Throughout it all, Roman remained pressed against me, a constant grounding force. His hands never left mine, his body a furnace at my back, his voice a relentless current in my ear. At some point the lines began to blur. His energy and mine mingled with Kale's, became a swirling vortex. I accidentally brushed against Roman's mind, and for a fleeting second, I felt something other than the ruthless king. I felt the crushing weight of his crown, the profound loneliness of being alpha, a deep aching chasm of loss from a past he kept shrouded in shadow, and a fierce, burning protectiveness for his people that was as breathtaking as it was terrifying. It was a glimpse of the man beneath the monster, and it shook me to my core. I cried out, stumbling back as the connection broke. The stolen energy within me dissipated in a rush, leaving me weak and trembling. Roman caught me before I could fall, his arms banding around my waist, pulling me flush against his hard body. "What was that?" he demanded, his voice rough with a new, unreadable emotion. I saw. I couldn't finish. How could I tell him I had touched his soul? He stared down at me, his golden eyes searching my face. The air grew thick, charged with something far more potent than stolen energy. The training had ceased to be about war and had become something dangerously intimate. His gaze dropped to my lips and his head began to lower. My breath hitched, my body screaming yes even as my mind screamed no. He was my captor, my enemy. But in his arms he felt like my destiny. The moment stretched, taut and fragile, before he seemed to catch himself. A muscle clenched in his jaw and he abruptly set me on my feet, stepping back. The loss of his heat was immediate and sharp. "Enough for today," he bit out, turning away from me as if he couldn't bear the sight of me. "Be ready to continue at dawn." He strode from the courtyard without a backward glance, leaving me shaking, breathless, and more terrified of my own body's betrayal than I had ever been of him. Chapter 4. My status as the Alpha's weapon made me a pariah within the pack. In the halls of the fortress, I was met with suspicious glares and hostile whispers. I was the outsider, the tool brought in by their king, a constant reminder of the impending war. My gilded cage began to feel smaller with each passing day. The isolation was a heavy cloak, suffocating me. Roman's daily training sessions were my only real human contact, a twisted reality that left me feeling more conflicted than ever. The pack's animosity came to a head in the communal dining hall. I was attempting to eat a quiet meal in a secluded corner when a female wolf, her lips curled back in a permanent sneer, approached my table. I recognized her as Lyra, one of the pack's fiercest hunters, her eyes the color of ice chips. "Look at the king's little pet," she said, her voice loud enough for the entire hall to hear. A ripple of cruel laughter followed. "Tell me, Echo, does he keep you warm in his bed at night? Is that how you're earning your keep?" My face burned with shame and anger. I kept my eyes on my plate, my hands clenched into fists in my lap. "Leave me alone," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "She speaks," Lyra taunted, leaning down, her hot breath smelling of roasted meat. "I don't know what our Alpha sees in you. You're weak. Fragile. You're not one of us. You'll only be a liability when the blood moons attack." "That is enough, Lyra." The voice cut through the hall like a thunderclap. Roman stood in the doorway, his presence sucking all the air and sound from the room. His golden eyes were not warm. They were glacial, fixed on the female who had dared to challenge his authority and, by extension, his possession. The entire hall went silent, the wolves frozen in a mixture of fear and reverence. Roman strode towards our table, his every step deliberate and menacing. He didn't even glance at me. His focus was entirely on Lyra, who had paled considerably. "Amber is my guest," he growled, the words low and vibrating with contained fury. "She is under my protection. Any who disrespect her, disrespect me. Do you understand?" "Alpha, I only meant—" "I know what you meant," he snarled, cutting her off. He was now towering over her, a predator about to strike. "You will apologize to her. Now." The humiliation on Lyra's face was stark, but the fear of her Alpha was greater. She turned to me, her icy eyes full of hatred. "I apologize," she muttered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Good," Roman said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Now get out of my sight." Lyra practically fled from the hall. He then swept his gaze over the remaining wolves. "Let this be a warning to you all. She is mine. Touch her, threaten her, or look at her the wrong way and you will answer to me." His public declaration, his possessive claim should have terrified me. And it did. but a darker, more treacherous part of me preened under the weight of it. He had defended me. He had claimed me in front of his entire pack. The moment the hall was empty save for the two of us, my anger returned, eclipsing the momentary thrill. "I didn't need your help," I snapped, rising from my chair. He turned his full attention on me, his eyes still burning with residual fury. "Clearly you did. You didn't do that for me," I accused, my voice rising. "You did it to protect your precious weapon. You can't have your toys getting broken before you have a chance to play with them." In a flash he was on me. He backed me against the cold stone wall, his hands slamming down on either side of my head, caging me in. The heavy wooden table scraped against the floor as he shoved it aside with his leg. His face was inches from mine, his wolf rampant just beneath the surface. I could see it in the feral glint of his eyes, in the faint elongation of his canines. "Do you truly believe that is all you are to me?" he growled, his voice a guttural sound that vibrated through the wall and into my spine. "A toy? A weapon?" I was trembling, trapped between his hard body and the unyielding stone. The scent of his arousal, dark and musky, filled my senses, and my own body responded with a shocking, shameless pulse of heat between my legs. What else would I be? I breathed, my defiance wavering. His gaze was intense, burning through my defenses. "My wolf knew the moment you walked into my throne room," he confessed, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name. "It scented you, recognized you. It screamed a word I have not allowed myself to consider for a decade." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. I could feel the tremor that ran through his powerful frame. "Mate?" he whispered, the single word a detonation in the space between us. My world tilted on its axis. Mate. The fated one. The other half of a wolf's soul. It was the stuff of legends, a bond of mythic proportions. And it explained everything. It explained the irresistible pull I felt towards him, the way my body sang in his presence, the way my very soul seemed to quiet when he was near. It explained my body's complete and utter betrayal. It wasn't a weakness, it was a destiny. A terrifying, savage destiny I was shackled to. He didn't just own me by right of a bargain. He owned me by right of fate itself, and I didn't know whether to run screaming or finally surrender. Chapter 5. The word hung in the air between us, shimmering with power and terrifying implications. Mate. It was an answer and a death sentence all in one. It explained the visceral, undeniable connection that hummed beneath my skin whenever Roman was near, but it also shackled me to him in a way that made my previous captivity seem like child's play. A bargain could be broken. Fate was inescapable. I spent the next day in a daze, replaying his confession in my mind. Was it possible? Could this brutal, savage king truly be my other half? Or was this just another form of manipulation, a more potent way to ensure his weapon's loyalty? My mind fought against the idea, searching for reasons to disbelieve, but my body had already accepted the truth. It had known from the very beginning, surrendering long before my conscious mind was even aware of the battle. Roman's demeanor towards me shifted. The relentless commander was still there during our training sessions, pushing me harder than ever, but now there were moments that were achingly personal. He started appearing at my chamber door with my evening meal, dismissing the guards and watching me eat in silence, his golden eyes tracking my every move. One evening he noticed me shiver, and the next morning, a thick, impossibly soft black wolf pelt was draped over the chair in my room. He never mentioned it, but I knew it was from him. These small gestures were more unsettling than his overt displays of power. They were intimate, possessive, and they slipped past my defenses with frightening ease. The fragile bubble of our charged existence was shattered by the arrival of a scout, his horse lathered and his face grim. He brought news. The Blood Moon Pack, led by their notoriously vicious alpha Ivan, was on the move. They were marching on the Western Pass. War was no longer a distant threat, it was at our doorstep. The fortress immediately thrummed with a new, urgent energy. The air was thick with the clang of steel being sharpened and the low, growling hum of werewolves preparing for battle. Roman summoned me to his war council. I walked into the chamber to find it filled with a dozen of his most trusted warriors and strategists. They were all hard, formidable males, their faces set like stone. When they saw me, a wave of skepticism and distrust radiated from them. To them I was still the Alpha's pet project, an unknown quantity. "She will be our advantage," Roman announced, his voice silencing any potential dissent. He stood before a massive table carved with a map of their territory. Ivan thinks he knows our strength. He does not know what we now possess. He looked at me. Show them. His command was absolute. He gestured to Kale, the warrior I had trained with. Draw from him. But do not hold it. Channel it into me. My blood ran cold. This was what he had been training me for. Not just to be a weapon but to be his weapon. To amplify his already immense power. The thought of his strength doubled by my abilities was staggering. With the eyes of the entire council on me, I had no choice. I met Kale's gaze, and this time I did not hesitate. I reached out with my will and pulled. Kale's energy flooded me, a familiar fire. But instead of containing it, I turned to Roman, who stood ready, his feet planted and his aura a roaring inferno. I opened the floodgates. The energy surged from me into him. Roman let out a guttural roar as my power slammed into him, merging with his own. The air around him crackled. The force of it threw me back a step, and the torches on the walls flickered wildly. His muscles swelled, his eyes glowing with such intensity they looked like twin suns. He was no longer just a king. He was a god of war, radiating a power so immense it was physically painful to behold. The other wolves in the room dropped to one knee, their heads bowed in submission to the overwhelming display of alpha dominance. The demonstration was a resounding success, but it left me utterly depleted, a hollowed-out shell. The reality of my purpose hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was to be a conduit for this destruction. Men would die, their life forces funneled through me to power this king. Later, Roman found me in the courtyard where we first trained, staring out at the shadowed mountains. The cold stone I sat on did little to stop my trembling. He came and sat beside me, the space between us charged with the aftermath of what we had done. They will fear you now, he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. He saw the terror in my eyes, the revulsion I felt for myself. They should, I whispered, my voice cracking. I am a monster. No, he said, his voice firm. He reached out, his hand covering mine. His touch was warm, grounding. You are a shield. Ivan and his pack are butchers. They raid, they slaughter entire settlements for sport. They will do the same to my people, to the women and children behind these walls, if we do not stop them. What we do to protect them. He paused, turning my hand over in his thumb stroking my palm. We will protect them. You and I. His words reframed everything. He wasn't just offering a justification. He was offering a partnership. He was sharing the burden of his crown with me. In that moment, staring into his molten gold eyes, I saw not just the savage king, but the desperate protector. I saw my mate. The war inside me ended. My mind finally surrendered to the truth my body had known all along. I leaned in and he met me halfway. His mouth crashed down on mine, and it wasn't a gentle kiss. It was fierce, brutal, and desperate. It was a kiss of anger and fear, of destiny accepted and a bargain sealed in fire. It was the taste of surrender, and it felt like coming home. I poured all my fear, my rage, and my helpless desire into that kiss, and he took it all, claiming me completely, not just as his weapon but as his queen. Chapter 6. That first kiss was a cataclysm. It wasn't just a meeting of lips. It was a collision of souls, a raw and desperate acknowledgement of the bond that had been thrumming between us since the moment I first laid eyes on him. The taste of him was wild and intoxicating, a potent mix of pine, power, and pure, undiluted male. He devoured my mouth, his kiss staking a claim so profound it branded my very essence. I met his ferocity with my own, my hands tangling in his long, dark hair, pulling him closer as if I could somehow absorb him into myself. All the fear, the anger, and the weeks of resentful captivity melted away in the furnace of his embrace. There was no king, no weapon, only a male and a female who had found their other half in the crucible of war. He broke the kiss only to trail his mouth down my jaw, along the sensitive column of my throat. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound of pure possession that vibrated through my entire body, making my knees weak. Mine, he rasped against my skin, his voice thick with a decade of loneliness and suppressed longing. He lifted me effortlessly, my legs wrapping around his waist as he pinned me back against the cold, unyielding stone of the courtyard wall. The cold was a stark contrast to the fire he ignited within me. His hands were everywhere, exploring the curves of my body with a rough, desperate reverence. He molded my hips, his fingers digging into my flesh as if to assure himself I was real. I could feel the hard ridge of his desire pressing against me, an undeniable testament to the effect I had on him. My own body answered with a slick aching heat, a shameless plea for the fulfillment only he could provide. This was the mate bond in its rawest form, a physical, emotional, and spiritual imperative that superseded everything else. He captured my mouth again, his tongue plundering its depths, tasting, learning, possessing. Through my empathic senses I was drowning in him. I felt the savage joy of his wolf finally claiming its mate, the fierce, unyielding protectiveness he felt for me, and the stark, terrifying vulnerability of a king who had just laid his heart at the feet of his captive. It was overwhelming, breathtaking. I realized with a jolt that he was feeling everything I was. My shock, my surrender, my burgeoning desire that mirrored his own. Our bond was a two-way street, a feedback loop of escalating passion. Roman, I breathed his name when he finally gave me a moment of air, the sound a ragged plea. His forehead rested against mine, his golden eyes blazing into me. Say it again, he commanded, his voice hoarse. Roman, I repeated, my voice stronger this time. It felt right on my tongue. It felt like coming home. He began moving against me, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sent sparks of friction through our clothes. The friction was a sweet torture, building a pressure deep inside me that coiled tighter and tighter. I cried out, my head falling back against the stone, arching into him. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling my scent as if it were the very air he needed to breathe. I have waited so long for you, Amber, he confessed, his voice muffled against my skin. Before I even knew you existed, I was waiting. Just as the pressure inside me felt like it was about to shatter, the courtyard archway was filled by one of his guards. Alpha, the warrior called out, his voice urgent but his eyes respectfully averted from the intimate scene. The sentries on the eastern ridge have sent a signal. Movement. A large party, traveling under a blood moon banner. Roman went rigid. The spell was broken. I felt the shift in him instantly. The passionate mate was subsumed by the ruthless Alpha King. The raw desire in his aura was banked, replaced by the cold, sharp focus of a commander. He let out a low, frustrated growl and gently set me down, though his hands lingered on my waist, a silent promise that this was far from over. He turned to the guard, his voice once again the familiar, authoritative rumble. How far? An hour's march from the river crossing, Alpha. They are moving fast. Roman nodded, his jaw tight. He looked back at me, and in his eyes, I saw the war between the man who wanted to spirit me away to his chambers and the king who had a duty to his people. The king won. This changes nothing between us, he said, his voice a low, intense promise. He cupped my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. This only gives me more to fight for. He leaned in and gave me one last hard kiss, a seal on his vow. It was quick, but it held the weight of everything that had just passed between us. Then he turned and strode from the courtyard, his warriors falling into step behind him, their shadows long in the torchlight. I was left alone, trembling and breathless, my body still thrumming with an unfulfilled ache. The war had arrived, but for the first time I knew with absolute certainty which side I was on. I was not his weapon. I was his mate. And I would see him through the coming storm. Chapter 7. The fortress transformed overnight. The low hum of preparation became a roar of purpose. Roman moved with a terrifying efficiency, his commands echoing through the stone halls as he marshaled his forces. The change in my own status was just as swift and absolute. I was no longer an outsider to be watched with suspicion. I was the Alpha's mate, a reality he made clear to everyone. He brought me into his strategy meetings, seating me not behind him, but beside him at the head of the great map table. The first time he did it, the council of warriors stared, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Kale, who had once pitied me, now looked at me with a newfound respect. Lyra, the she-wolf who had tormented me, stood in the corner, her gaze fixed on the floor, the picture of submission. Roman silenced any unspoken questions with a single, sweeping glare. Amber sees what we cannot, he announced to the room, his hand resting possessively on the back of my chair. Her senses are a part of our arsenal. She will help us anticipate Ivan's moves. Her counsel is my counsel. You will treat her as you treat me. It was a bold declaration, one that cemented my place not just as his mate, but as his queen. The weight of it was terrifying, but the fierce pride in his eyes as he looked at me gave me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I forced myself to sit taller, to meet the gazes of the hardened warriors around me, and to focus on the maps laid out before us. Our training also evolved. It was no longer about him pushing me to my limits. It became a dance, a synchronization of two immense powers. We met in the courtyard at dawn, but instead of me drawing power from a third party, I began to draw directly from him. It was an act of supreme trust on his part. I would tap into the raging inferno of his alpha energy, siphoning off a fraction of his strength, feeling his very life force flow into me. Then, on his command, I would send it surging back, amplified by my own abilities. One morning, the exercise became something more. I was drawing from him the energy, a warm, intoxicating river pouring into me. Felt like pure Roman, wild, strong, and unyielding. The connection was so profound, so intimate that my focus wavered. My thoughts drifted from battle tactics to the memory of his mouth on mine, the feel of his body pressed against me. The energy I sent back to him was no longer just raw power. It was colored with my own burgeoning desire, my longing for him. He staggered, a sharp grunt escaping his lips. He looked at me, his golden eyes wide, a dark flush creeping up his neck. "What was that?" he rasped. I don't know," I lied, my face burning. He knew. A slow, predatory smile spread across his lips. "Do it again." This time it wasn't a command for a weapon but a plea from a male. I reached out again, but this time I didn't just pull on his strength. I pulled on the passion I felt simmering just beneath his surface, the possessive need he had for me. I drew it into myself, letting it mingle with my own desperate ache, and then I sent the combined wave of pure, unadulterated lust crashing back into him. He let out a guttural roar and was on me in a heartbeat. He lifted me onto the low stone wall that ringed the courtyard, stepping between my legs, his body caging mine. The training was forgotten, the impending war a distant thought. "You play a dangerous game, little Echo," he growled, his mouth hovering just above mine. "I'm just following your orders," I breathed, my hands clutching his leather-clad shoulders. "From now on, I order you to do that as often as possible," he murmured before his lips crashed down on mine. The kiss was a maelstrom of the energy we had just been wielding. It was power and passion intertwined, each feeding the other until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. His hands roamed my body, learning every curve and line, while my own were busy exploring the hard planes of his back and chest. Our combined power crackled in the air around us, a visible shimmer of heat and light. It was as if our very souls were making love, our physical bodies struggling to catch up. He pulled back, his breathing ragged, his eyes glowing with an almost feral light. "Ivan can come," he said, his voice a low, confident growl. "He can bring his entire army. He has no idea what he is facing." In that moment I understood. Our bond wasn't just a matter of fate or passion. It was our greatest weapon. The love and desire we felt for each other was a power stronger than any army, and we would wield it together to protect our home, our people, and our future. He sealed his promise with another kiss, and in the cold morning air of a fortress preparing for war, I felt safer and more certain than I ever had in my life. Chapter 8. As the days grew shorter and the tension in the fortress mounted, Roman became more withdrawn, the weight of his command a visible burden. I could feel his anxiety bleeding into me through our bond, a constant low-level thrum of worry for his people. One evening, after a particularly grueling council meeting, he found me in the fortress library, a vast circular room filled with ancient scrolls and leather-bound tomes. Instead of discussing troop movements or battle lines, he took my hand. "Come with me," he said, his voice quiet. "There is something I must show you." He led me not towards the war room or his chambers, but down a narrow, winding staircase I had never seen before, deep into the mountain's heart. The air grew cooler, filled with the scent of damp earth and something clean like rain on stone. We emerged into a breathtaking cavern. A subterranean spring fed a crystal-clear pool in the center of the grotto, its surface perfectly still. Soft, phosphorescent moss clung to the cavern walls, casting a gentle, ethereal blue-green light over everything. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic drip of water. It was a place of profound peace, a secret sanctuary hidden from the world. "This is the heart of the mountain," Roman said, his voice echoing slightly in the stillness. My family has guarded it for generations. It is a place of healing. A place of truth. He led me to the edge of the pool and sat on a smooth, flat rock, pulling me down beside him. For a long time he just stared into the water, his profile etched in the soft light. The crushing weight I had sensed in him before, the deep chasm of loss, was more potent here, rising to the surface. When you first touched my mind in the courtyard, he began, his voice rough. You felt it, didn't you? The scar on my soul. I simply nodded, my heart aching for him. I was young, not yet the alpha, he continued, his gaze distant. My father was king. And I had found my mate. Her name was Alara. He said the name as if it were a fragile piece of glass. She was not of our pack. She was a healer from a small neutral clan in the valleys. The bond was instant, just as it was with you. I was reckless. I thought our love was enough to overcome any obstacle. He paused, a muscle clenching in his jaw. My father forbade the union. He saw it as a weakness, a dilution of our bloodline. And Ivan, his father, ruled the blood moons then just as he does now. They saw our internal strife as an opportunity. They attacked Alara's village, using it as bait to draw my father's forces out. It was a slaughter. His voice broke, the sound a raw agony that tore at my soul. I was with my father's warriors. Alara, she was captured. Ivan's father sent me a message. A single bloody lock of her hair. By the time we fought our way to their camp, it was too late. I found her body. I held her as she died. Tears streamed down my face, my own grief mingling with the waves of agony pouring from him. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him tight, offering what little comfort I could. He was trembling, the great and terrible Wolf King, undone by a memory. I killed Ivan's father that day, he whispered into my hair. And I inherited his son's hatred. My own father died in the battle. I became king of a wounded pack with a shattered heart. I sealed it away. I swore I would never feel that pain again. I would never allow myself to be that vulnerable. And then you walked into my throne room and my wolf screamed, mate. I fought it. Gods, how I fought it. He pulled back, his hands cupping my face, his golden eyes swimming with unshed tears. I was a fool. You are not a weakness, Amber. You are my strength. My redemption. Oh, Roman, I sobbed, my heart breaking and healing all at once. I leaned in and kissed him, a kiss that held no desperate lust, only a profound, boundless love and a desire to soothe his ancient wounds. It was a kiss of acceptance, of shared pain, and of a future he thought had been stolen from him. He gently undressed me, his touch full of a reverence that made me feel cherished. I helped him with the fastenings of his own clothes, until we stood bare before each other in the soft, magical light of the grotto. He led me into the spring. The water was cool and silky, washing away the dust and fear of the world above. In the heart of his mountain, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, we came together. Our joining was slow, deep, and impossibly tender. It wasn't about staking a claim or sating a primal urge. It was about healing. With every movement, I pushed my own love and light into him, using my empathic power not as a weapon, but as a balm, trying to fill the hollow places in his soul. I felt his pain, his guilt, his loneliness, and I absorbed it, offering him my own peace in return. He clung to me, his control finally breaking, whispering my name like a prayer. In that sacred grotto, we were not a king and his queen or a warrior and his weapon. We were just two fractured souls, finally made whole by the transcendent power of the mate bond. Chapter 9. The alarm came an hour before dawn. A single, piercing horn blast echoed from the western watchtower, a sound that sliced through the pre-dawn quiet and jolted the fortress to life. The first skirmish had begun. Ivan wasn't waiting for a full-scale assault. He was testing our defenses. Roman was already dressed and moving by the time my eyes flew open, his face a mask of cold fury. He strapped on his leather armor, the familiar creak and groan of the straps a grim percussion in our chamber. He turned to me, his eyes blazing. "Stay here." "No," I said, already out of bed and pulling on the practical tunic and trousers I now favored. "We do this together." That was the promise. For a moment I saw the fierce, protective male argue with the pragmatic commander. The commander won. He gave a curt nod. "Stay behind Kale. Do not leave his side. Funnel everything you can into me. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. The battle was joined at the Western Pass, a narrow, rocky defile that was the most vulnerable approach to the fortress. By the time we arrived, the clash of steel and the snarls of wolves already filled the air. Roman let out a battle cry that was more wolf than man and waded into the fray, his massive broadsword a blur of silver. I stood on a rocky ledge overlooking the fight, flanked by Kale and 2 other guards. The chaos was overwhelming. The air was thick with the scent of blood and sweat, and the sounds of pain and rage were a physical assault. My empathic senses were on fire. I felt the terror of a young warrior as he faced his first battle, the grim determination of a veteran, the bloodlust of the Blood Moon attackers. It was a whirlwind of violent emotion that threatened to tear me apart. "Focus, my lady." Kale's voice was a firm anchor in the storm. "Focus on the Alpha." I closed my eyes, shutting out the visual chaos, and reached for Roman. His aura was a bonfire in the middle of a blizzard, a beacon of controlled fury. I latched onto him and then began to do as I was trained. I opened myself up, becoming a vessel. I pulled on the strength of the Shadowfang warriors around me, their loyalty, their rage, their desperate will to protect their home. It poured into me, a torrent of raw power. It was agony. I felt every strain, every blow they took as if it were my own. But I didn't hold it. I channeled the raw, chaotic energy, refined it, and sent it surging into Roman. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. He roared, and the very ground seemed to shake. He moved like a force of nature, his sword cleaving through the enemy's ranks. Where before he was a great warrior, now he was a demigod of destruction. The Blood Moon wolves, who fought with a savage, undisciplined ferocity, faltered before this display of overwhelming power. They had never faced an alpha whose strength was being constantly replenished and amplified. I saw one of Ivan's lieutenants, a massive brute with a scarred face, break through the line and charge Roman from his blind side, an axe raised high. There was no time to shout a warning. Acting on pure instinct, I did something I had never done before. I didn't just channel power into Roman. I reached out and yanked. I ripped the strength and forward momentum right out of the attacker. The brute stumbled, his axe swing faltering as if his muscles had suddenly turned to water. It was only for a second, but it was enough. Roman spun, his sword flashing in a deadly arc, and the threat was eliminated. He glanced up at me, his eyes wide with shock and dawning realization of what I had just done. I had become more than a conduit. I had become a true weapon. The tide of the battle turned. Faced with an unbreakable alpha and a coordinated defense, the Blood Moons broke and fled, leaving their dead and wounded behind. As the last of the attackers disappeared down the pass, the adrenaline that had sustained me vanished. The psychic backlash was crippling. The pain of every wound I had channeled, the echo of every death I had felt, slammed into me all at once. My legs gave out and I collapsed, a strangled sob escaping my lips. Kale caught me, but an instant later he was pushed aside. Roman was there, his armor splattered with blood, his face a mixture of triumph and frantic concern. He gathered me into his arms, holding me against his chest. "I've got you, Amber," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "Shoo, I have you." He carried me away from the battlefield, back towards the fortress. I pressed my face into his chest, shaking uncontrollably, the ghosts of the battle still raging in my mind. He didn't take me to the healers. He took me straight to our chamber and barred the door. He stripped off his blood-soaked armor and then gently undressed me, his hands surprisingly tender. He laid me on the bed and covered my body with his own. There was no gentle prelude, no soft words. It was a raw, desperate claiming. He entered me with a single powerful thrust, and the feeling of being filled by him, of being anchored by his strength and life, was the only thing that could silence the screaming echoes in my soul. It was a fierce, almost violent coupling, a primal reaffirmation of life in the face of death. He moved with a frantic urgency, chasing away the shadows, branding me with his body, his scent, his life. And as my release finally tore through me, a wave of light and sensation that momentarily erased everything else, I clung to him, my anchor, my king, my savage mate who had just shown me the true, terrifying cost of our power. Chapter 10. Victory was a bitter, metallic taste in the air, mingling with the scent of blood and healing herbs. The skirmish was won, but the fortress was now a house of mourning. We had lost 6 warriors and dozens more were wounded. The cost of holding the pass had been steep. Roman and I walked through the great hall, which had been converted into a makeshift infirmary. The sight of his people, wounded and grieving, settled a heavy weight in his soul that I felt as if it were my own. He stopped at every pallet, offering a word of comfort, a nod of respect, his presence a reassurance that their sacrifice was not in vain. My role was different. As I passed the families of the fallen, I could feel their grief, sharp, suffocating waves of it. It threatened to drown me. I remembered Roman's words in the grotto, how he had shut himself off from pain. I now understood why. My empathic gift was a curse in this place of sorrow. But then I saw a young boy no older than 7 huddled in a corner, weeping silently for a father who would not be coming home. Instead of shielding myself, I did the opposite. I opened myself to his pain. I knelt before him and gently took his small hand. I didn't offer empty platitudes. I simply let him feel my presence, and I absorbed a portion of his overwhelming grief into myself, taking the edge off his suffering. The boy's sobs quieted and he looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. His mother, her own face streaked with tears, gave me a look of profound, heart-wrenching gratitude. Roman watched me from across the hall, a complex mix of pride and worry in his eyes. He came to my side as I stood, his hand finding the small of my back, a silent, steadying support. He was my anchor and I was becoming his. We were learning how to bear the burdens of leadership together. Later in the war room the mood was grim. The victory had been costly and we all knew it was just the beginning. The council was assembled, along with a captured Blood Moon warrior who had been taken alive. He was bound to a chair in the center of the room, defiant and snarling. "Ivan will not stop," he spat, blood trickling from his lip. This was nothing. He wanted to see the great Wolf King for himself. "He saw," Roman growled, his voice low and dangerous. The captive laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "He saw a beast, yes. But he has his own weapons. He has something you cannot fight. Something that will turn your own people against you." A chill went through the room. "What are you talking about?" Kale demanded, stepping forward. The prisoner's eyes gleamed with malice. "He has the Crimson Sage. It grows only on the highest peaks of his territory. A single scratch from a blade coated in its dust is all it takes. It doesn't kill. It does something much worse. It severs the mind from the wolf." A collective gasp went through the room. To sever a werewolf from their wolf was a fate worse than death. It would leave them a hollowed-out shell, trapped in their human form, stripped of their strength, their senses, their very identity. It was a form of damnation. "It drives them mad with grief and rage," the captive sneered. "They turn on anyone near them in their pain. Ivan has coated hundreds of his arrows with it. His archers will rain it down on your army. Your pack will tear itself apart from the inside out. Your precious weapon," he nodded his head towards me, "will be useless then." The revelation landed like a physical blow. This was Ivan's secret weapon. Not brute force but a poison of the soul, a psychological horror that would turn Roman's greatest strength, the loyalty of his pack, into his greatest weakness. All our strategies, all our preparations were for a direct assault. We were completely unprepared for this. The room was silent, the grim reality of their situation sinking in. Roman stood motionless, his face carved from stone, but I could feel the surge of cold dread through our bond. He was a king facing a threat that steel and strength could not defeat. That night sleep was impossible. The fortress was quiet, but it was the tense, coiled silence of a predator waiting for the final strike. Roman and I stood on the balcony of our chamber, the cold night air a sharp bite against our skin. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, pulling me back against his chest. "He is cleverer than his father," Roman murmured, his voice a low vibration against my back. "He attacks the soul of my pack, not its body." "We will find a way," I said, though I didn't know how. I leaned my head back against his shoulder, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I know," he said, his lips brushing against my temple. "Because this time I do not fight alone." He turned me in his arms, his golden eyes searching mine in the moonlight. The fear was still there, a cold knot in the pit of my stomach, but looking at him I felt a spark of defiance. He had faced his past and I had accepted my power. We were bound by more than fate. We were forged in the fires of an impossible choice. He lowered his head and kissed me slow and deep. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of the battlefield, nor the healing kiss of the grotto. It was a kiss of quiet determination, a silent vow between two sovereigns facing the coming dark. The passion was still there, a potent undercurrent, but it was banked, controlled, honed into a single point of focus. We had one night of peace left before the true war began. We would face the storm tomorrow. Tonight we were simply Roman and Amber, and in the heart of the storm we had found each other. Chapter 11. The captive's revelation settled a chilling pall over the fortress. The crimson sage. A poison of the soul. Hope, which had bloomed after our small victory, withered on the vine. I watched Roman in the hours that followed, saw the grim lines tighten around his mouth and the haunted look return to his eyes. He was a king facing an enemy he couldn't punch, couldn't cut, couldn't intimidate. It was a foe that attacked the very fabric of his pack, the bond between a wolf and their inner beast that was the core of their existence. While his warriors sharpened their steel and reinforced the fortress walls, Roman turned to a different kind of weapon: knowledge. He took me to the ancient library, the room's circular walls a silent testament to generations of Shadowfang lore. The air was thick with the scent of aged parchment and dust. If a poison like this exists, he reasoned, his voice a low rumble that did little to hide his desperation, there must be a record of it. A counteragent. A forgotten cure. We spent hours poring over brittle scrolls and heavy leather-bound tomes. Roman, a man of action and warfare, moved with a frustrated impatience, his large hands looking clumsy as they turned the delicate pages. I, on the other hand, felt a strange sense of purpose. My empathic senses, so often a curse, were a help here. I could feel the faintest residue of the long-dead scribes who had written these texts, sensing which scrolls held tales of war and which held knowledge of herb lore and ancient rituals. It was I who found it, tucked away in a scroll detailing the founding of the fortress. The text spoke of the heart of the mountain, the sacred grotto he had shown me. It described the spring not just as a place of healing, but as a nexus of pure, untainted telluric energy. An ancient passage written in a cramped, faded script caught my eye. "Listen to this," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. Roman was instantly at my side, his body a warm, solid presence against my arm. I read aloud, "When the soul of the wolf is shadowed by blight, only the soul of the mountain can make it right. The heart warden, whose spirit is the pack's own, must drink of the spring and stand as a stone. Through the bond of the Alpha her power will flow, a shield of pure spirit to ward off the woe." We stared at each other, the words hanging in the air between us. It was archaic, cryptic, but the meaning was clear. The heart warden. The Alpha's bond. A shield of pure spirit. It was talking about me. "The spring," Roman breathed, his eyes wide with a dawning, incredulous hope. "The ritual, it requires you." "It requires us," I corrected, my gaze unwavering. "Through the bond of the Alpha. This isn't something I can do alone. It relies on the connection between us, Roman. The mate bond." The fear in his aura was suddenly eclipsed by a fierce, blazing determination. He saw a path forward, a way to fight back that did not rely on steel alone. But I could also feel his hesitation, the protective instinct that roared within him. This ritual sounded dangerous, demanding that I become a living conduit for the mountain's power, a psychic shield for his entire army. "It will be a great strain on you," he said, his hand coming up to cup my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin. The simple gesture was filled with a world of concern. "What choice do we have?" I asked softly, leaning into his touch. "You said it yourself. I am your strength. Let me prove it." He searched my eyes, looking for any sign of doubt. He found none. The captive had said my power would be useless. We were about to prove him wrong. Our bond was not just a twist of fate. It was the key to our salvation. "Prepare yourself," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We go to the grotto at moonrise. We will forge our own weapon." He sealed his words with a kiss, not of passion but of fierce, desperate resolve. We had a plan. We had a sliver of hope. And as he held me there amidst the ancient dust and forgotten lore, I knew that whatever happened we would face it together. Ivan wanted to attack the soul of the Shadowfang pack, but he had no idea he was about to face the combined soul of its alpha and its newly crowned queen. Chapter 12. Moonlight spilled through a fissure in the cavern ceiling, painting the grotto in strokes of silver and shadow. The soft, ethereal glow of the phosphorescent moss seemed to pulse in time with my own nervous heartbeat. The air was still and cool, carrying the clean, earthy scent of the spring. This place, once a sanctuary of healing and confession, was about to become our forge. Roman stood at the edge of the pool, stripped to the waist, the moonlight catching the intricate tattoos across his broad back and the jagged lines of his old scars. He was the picture of raw, primal power, a king in his most sacred place. He turned to me, his golden eyes impossibly bright in the dim light, and held out his hand. "Are you ready?" His voice was a low rumble, filled with a tension that mirrored my own. "I am," I said, and my own voice did not shake. I took his hand, his calloused palm warm and grounding against mine, and allowed him to lead me into the water. The spring was shockingly cold, raising goosebumps on my skin and stealing my breath. But it was a clean, pure cold, a feeling of being washed clean of the fear and grime of the world above. We waded to the center of the pool, the water swirling around our waists. There, facing each other, he placed his hands on my hips, pulling me close. "The scroll said you must drink of the spring," he murmured, his gaze intense. "But it is not just the water, Amber. It is the energy within it. The heart of the mountain. You must draw it into yourself just as you draw strength from me." I nodded, closing my eyes and concentrating. I reached out with my senses, pushing past the roaring bonfire of Roman's own aura to find the subtler energy of the grotto. It was there, a deep, calm and immensely powerful hum that resonated from the very stones beneath my feet. It was ancient and wise, the lifeblood of the mountain. I took a breath, and just as I had done with Kale in the courtyard, I pulled. The power that flooded me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't the fiery, aggressive energy of a werewolf. It was cool, clear and vast. It felt like swallowing a galaxy. A gasp tore from my lips and my body arched, a silent scream of effort and ecstasy. My vision went white. The power was too much, a river threatening to break its banks and sweep me away. "Amber, look at me." Roman's voice cut through the wide out. "Anchored to me. I am here." I forced my eyes open and found his. He was my lifeline. I focused on him, on the unshakable strength in his golden gaze, on the feel of his hands holding me firm. "Now," he commanded, his voice a low growl of concentration. "The scroll said to build a shield. Project it. Don't just let it fill you, let it flow through you. Use our bond as the conduit." I did as he said. I took the overwhelming power of the mountain and pushed it towards him, towards the link that connected our souls. And then something extraordinary happened. As the pure energy of the spring met the fiery passion of our mate bond, it transformed. It was no longer just a raw force. It became a shimmering, incandescent shield of spiritual light. It flowed out from us, expanding in a dome that filled the entire cavern, making the mossy walls blaze with a brilliant silver-blue light. The very air crackled with a power that was both serene and unbreakable. We stood at the epicenter of a miracle, a living shield forged from the heart of the mountain, the soul of a king and the love of his mate. The effort was immense, draining me on a fundamental level. I felt myself starting to fade, my consciousness fraying at the edges. "Don't let go," Roman grunted, his own muscles straining as he poured his own strength into me, replenishing what the ritual took. "Stay with me, Amber." He lowered his head, his mouth finding mine in a kiss that was both desperate and life-giving. He wasn't just kissing me, he was breathing his own life force into me, using the physical intimacy to reinforce the spiritual one. His hands slid from my waist to cup my face, his tongue delving deep, a silent promise and a fierce command to hold on. The kiss went on, a closed circuit of power and passion. He poured his strength into me and I used it to sustain the shield, our bodies and souls completely intertwined in the act of creation. When we finally broke apart, we were both trembling, gasping for air. But the shield held, a beautiful pulsating dome of light that now encompassed the entire grotto. It was done. "We did it," I whispered, my voice weak but filled with awe. "We did it," he corrected, pulling me into his arms, holding me tight against his chest. I rested my head against him, listening to the steady, powerful beat of his heart. Exhaustion settled deep into my bones, but it was coupled with a profound sense of triumph. We were ready. Ivan could bring his poison and his armies. We had forged a miracle in the dark, and we would meet him in the dawn. Chapter 13. The eve of battle was a strange, suspended moment in time. The air in the fortress was thick with the scent of oiled leather, sharpening steel, and a tense, collective anticipation. Every warrior was ready, their fear honed to a sharp, deadly edge. But tonight was for words, not swords. Roman gathered the entire pack in the great hall. He stood on the raised dais, not on his throne but before it, a commander among his soldiers. I stood beside him. The flickering torchlight cast his shadow long and formidable across the assembled wolves. When he spoke, his voice needed no magical amplification. It was the voice of a true alpha, filled with a power that commanded absolute silence and attention. He told them of the Crimson Sage. A low, angry growl rippled through the crowd as they learned of the dishonorable weapon Ivan intended to use. He let their anger build and then he raised his hand for silence. Ivan seeks to poison our souls, to sever us from the very spirit that makes us strong, Roman declared, his voice ringing with conviction. He believes this will break us. He's wrong. He attacks the wolf, but he does not understand the heart of this pack. His gaze swept over the crowd and then he turned, his eyes finding mine. He took my hand, his grip firm and warm, and drew me forward to stand beside him facing his people. For generations the Alpha has been the pack's sword and its shield. But today we have a new kind of shield. My mate Amber is the heart warden of the Shadowfangs. The title was new, created in that very moment, and it resonated with a power that settled over me like a royal mantle. Through our bond, he continued, his voice soaring, she has harnessed the very spirit of this mountain. She will create a shield over us, a shield of the soul. Ivan's poison will not touch you. His arrows will be nothing more than sharpened sticks. He thinks he is clever, but he has only succeeded in uniting us, in forging a weapon he cannot possibly comprehend. Tomorrow we will not fight as a pack of wolves. We will fight as one spirit with one heart under one shield. A moment of stunned silence was followed by an explosive roar. They did not just cheer, they howled. They beat their fists against their chests and stamped their feet, the sound a thunderous earthquake of morale and loyalty. They howled for their alpha and then to my utter shock they began to chant my name. Amber. Heart Warden. The sound washed over me, a wave of acceptance and fierce loyalty so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. In that moment I was no longer a captive, a weapon or an outsider. I was theirs and they were mine. Later the fortress settled into a quiet, solemn vigil. In the privacy of our chambers, the weight of the coming dawn pressed in on us. All the bravado and speeches fell away, leaving just a man and a woman who might not see another sunset. Roman said nothing. He simply came to me and began to slowly, reverently undress me. His hands, which had so recently wielded swords and commanded armies, were impossibly gentle. He memorized me with his fingertips, tracing the line of my collarbone, the curve of my waist, the slope of my hip. I did the same for him, my fingers mapping the landscape of his scars, each one a story of a battle that had led him here to me. When we were bare he led me to the bed. Our lovemaking that night was not the fierce, claiming passion of our earlier encounters. It was a slow, deep and desperate prayer. It was a promise to live, an act of defiance against the death that waited outside our door. Every kiss was lingering, every caress deliberate. He worshipped my body, treating it like a sacred temple, and I clung to him, inhaling his scent, trying to burn the feel of his skin against mine into my memory forever. He moved inside me with a profound slowness, a rhythm that was about connection, not release. We looked into each other's eyes, our souls laid bare. Through our bond, I felt his desperate fear of losing me, and he felt my unwavering resolve to protect him and his people. There were no words, only the silent, perfect communication of mated souls on the precipice. As we found our release together, it was not a shattering climax, but a quiet, profound wave that seemed to fuse us together, making it impossible to tell where one of us ended and the other began. Afterward we lay tangled in the furs, his arms a fortress around me. His head was pillowed on my chest, his ear over my heart. I will find you again, he whispered into the darkness, his voice thick with a raw, painful sincerity. If the worst should happen in the next life I will find you again. I swear it. You won't have to, I whispered back, stroking his hair. Because tomorrow we both come home. We held each other through the long, dark hours, two hearts beating as one, waiting for the blood-red dawn. Chapter 14. The war horn's call was a mournful, guttural cry in the gray light of dawn. The final battle had come. We stood on the high ramparts of the fortress, looking down at the valley below. Ivan's army was a vast, dark stain upon the land, a horde of thousands, their blood moon banners snapping like angry red tongues in the wind. My place was in the center of the main courtyard, the most defensible position. I was surrounded by a circle of Roman's most elite royal guards, Kale at their head. My purpose was singular: to raise the shield and maintain it. Roman stood on the parapet above the main gate, his black armor a stark contrast to the pale morning. He caught my eye from across the distance, and even from so far away I could feel the reassuring strength of his love and confidence flow through me. He gave a single sharp nod. No. I closed my eyes and reached for the power we had forged in the grotto. It was there, sleeping just beneath my skin, a cool, clear reservoir of the mountain's soul. I took a deep breath and released it. The shield sprang into existence, a vast, shimmering dome of silver-blue light that was nearly invisible to the naked eye. It expanded rapidly from my position, washing over the walls, the warriors, and the entire fortress in a silent, incandescent wave. A collective gasp went up from our army as they felt it pass over them, a feeling of profound peace and unshakable spiritual strength. I felt our warriors' anxieties calm, their resolve harden. The shield was more than a defense, it was a beacon of hope. Down below, Ivan's army let out a roar and charged. The battle began. The first wave was the archers. As one, 1,000 blood moon warriors drew their bows, and a black cloud of arrows soared into the sky, their tips coated with the faint red dust of the crimson sage. The arrows rained down upon the fortress walls, and I braced myself for the psychic impact. Each arrow that struck the shield sent a small, sharp jolt through me, like a sting of static electricity. But the poison they carried was utterly neutralized. I could feel its malignant energy dissolve into nothingness upon contact with the pure spirit of the shield. Our warriors on the walls, who had braced for the worst, let out a triumphant roar as the arrows either shattered against the invisible barrier or clattered harmlessly to the stone, their foul magic rendered inert. Ivan's primary weapon had failed. His shock and rage were a palpable wave of fury, even from the valley floor. The psychological blow to his army was immense. They had come expecting to sow madness and chaos, and instead, their ultimate weapon had been turned into a useless gesture. But Ivan was not his father. He was adaptable. He signaled the main assault. Hordes of his warriors, many already in their massive wolf forms, crashed against the fortress gates like a tidal wave of fur and claws. Maintaining the shield while the battle raged was the hardest thing I had ever done. It required every ounce of my concentration. Every blow of a battering ram against the gate, every clash of steel, every cry of pain from our defenders sent a tremor through the shield and, by extension, through me. It was like trying to hold a pane of glass steady in the middle of an earthquake. Sweat beaded on my brow and a tremor started in my hands. I could feel my energy reserves beginning to drain at an alarming rate. Roman felt it too. Through our bond I could feel a spike of his concern for me, a sharp distraction from his own fight. Stay focused. I sent back to him, pouring all my conviction into the thought. I will not fail. He was a whirlwind of destruction on the walls, his broadsword singing a song of death. He fought with the strength of 10 men, fueled by the righteous fury of a king protecting his home. But the numbers were against us. For every blood moon warrior that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place. Then I saw him. Ivan. He was not on the front lines. He had scaled the cliffs on the eastern flank, a place with fewer defenders. He was in his full wolf form, a monstrous creature easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with fur the color of dried blood and eyes that burned with cunning hatred. He slaughtered the few guards on that section of the wall and leaped down into the secondary courtyard, cutting a bloody path towards the fortress's heart. Towards me. My circle of guards moved instantly to intercept him, Kale at the fore. But Ivan was a force of nature, tossing warriors aside like dolls. My concentration on the main shield wavered. A section of it flickered over the front gate. An arrow, a single lucky shot, got through. It struck a warrior in the shoulder. I felt it instantly, the searing pain of the wound followed by the cold, creeping horror of the crimson sage taking root. I heard the man scream, a horrifying, broken sound as he felt his wolf being torn from his soul. The scream acted like a clarion call to Roman. He turned, saw Ivan's rampage, saw my faltering shield, and without a second's hesitation he leaped from the high parapet, landing in the courtyard below with a ground-shaking impact. The duel of the alphas was at hand, And I was weakening, the fate of everyone I loved resting on my rapidly failing shoulders. Chapter 15. The clash of the two alphas was a primal explosion of violence that silenced the surrounding battle. Roman in his human form was already a terrifying force. But as Ivan lunged, Roman met him halfway, his body twisting and expanding in the fluid, brutal transformation of the shift. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles swelled, and in a heartbeat the Wolf King stood in his true form. He was magnificent and terrible, a colossal black wolf whose size rivaled Ivan's. His fur was the color of midnight, and his golden eyes were blazing suns of pure alpha power. The two titans of the werewolf world crashed into each other with a sound like thunder, a whirlwind of claws and teeth. They tore at each other, a brutal dance of dominance. The courtyard stones were slick with their blood. Every time Ivan's claws found purchase, a cry of agony was ripped from my soul. I felt Roman's pain through the bond, sharp and searing, and it made the shield flicker violently. My vision began to blur at the edges. The energy required to maintain the dome while my mate was in mortal combat was more than I could bear. Kale and the other guards were trying to help, but this was a battle beyond them. This was a conflict of alphas, a war that could only have one victor. Roman was stronger, but Ivan was more savage, fighting with a rabid desperation. He managed to sink his teeth into Roman's shoulder, and Roman roared in agony, his blood staining the stones dark. Seeing him wounded, seeing the king who had shown me his soul and the mate who had healed my own brought down to his knees, broke something inside me. A dam of pure, incandescent fury burst within my heart. My fear vanished, replaced by a rage so profound it was a physical force. He would not take him from me. I did something I hadn't been trained for, something born of pure, desperate instinct. I narrowed the focus of the Great Shield. Instead of a defensive dome protecting the entire fortress, I collapsed it, focusing every last drop of my power and the mountain's energy into a single concentrated beam of spiritual force, and I aimed it directly at Ivan. It wasn't a physical attack. It was an assault on his soul. Ivan was in the middle of tearing at Roman's flank when the beam hit him. He screamed, a high-pitched sound of agony that was utterly inhuman. He stumbled back, shaking his massive head as if to dislodge a hornet. I didn't let up. I poured every ounce of pain and grief I had ever felt, my own Roman's, that of the weeping boy in the great hall, into that beam. I took the very weapon Ivan sought to use, the weapon of the soul, and turned it back on him 100-fold. I flooded his mind with the terror of his victims, the agony of the wolves he had slaughtered, the psychic echo of every life he had ever destroyed. For the first time, the butcher of the blood moons felt the pain he had so gleefully inflicted on others. He was drowning in it, his mind shattering under the weight of his own sins. He was psychically blinded, deafened, and crippled. Roman, momentarily stunned by the suddenness of my attack, instantly recognized his opportunity. With a final guttural roar that was both a cry of vengeance and a declaration of love for his mate, he lunged. His jaws, powerful enough to snap trees, closed around Ivan's throat. There was a sickening crunch of bone and then silence. Ivan, the savage alpha of the blood moons, fell to the stones, his malevolent spirit extinguished forever. As his body hit the ground, a collective psychic gasp went through the battlefield. The Blood Moon army, their alpha link severed, froze in confusion and terror. Their morale shattered completely. The fight went out of them and they broke, fleeing back down the valley in a disorganized rout. The battle was over. We had won. The moment the last of my rage was spent, the power I had been wielding vanished. The shield collapsed. The strength drained from my body like sand from an hourglass. The world dissolved into a gray, fuzzy tunnel. My legs buckled. But I didn't hit the ground. Roman, already shifting back to his human form, his body battered and bleeding, caught me in his arms. He fell to his knees, holding me tight against his chest. "Amber," he cried, his voice frantic. I managed to lift a hand to his face, my fingers tracing the new gash on his cheek. "You're safe," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "We're safe," he corrected, his voice thick with emotion as he pressed his forehead against mine. "You saved us. You saved me, my heart." The last thing I saw before the darkness claimed me was his beautiful, savage face, his golden eyes shining with tears of relief and a love so powerful it lit up the world. I had been his captive, but now I was his queen. I had been his weapon, but now I was his salvation. And as I fell into a deep, healing unconsciousness, I knew I was finally truly home. Chapter 16. The Stillness After the Storm. I awoke to stillness. Not the tense, coiled silence of dread, but a deep, settled calm that seemed to emanate from the very stones of the fortress. My body felt heavy as if I had slept for a year, but the frantic, screaming echoes in my soul were gone, replaced by a quiet hum. I opened my eyes to the familiar sight of the timbered ceiling in our chamber. "You're awake." Roman's voice was a low, gravelly sound, thick with relief. He was sitting in a heavy oak chair beside the bed, a position he clearly hadn't moved from in some time. His left arm was in a sling, and a fresh line of stitches traced a path along his jaw, but his golden eyes were fixed on me, clear and filled with an aching tenderness. He looked exhausted, battle-worn, and more beautiful than I had ever seen him. "How long?" I whispered, my throat dry. 2 days, he said, rising and pouring a cup of water from a pitcher. He carefully slipped an arm under my shoulders, helping me sit up. The simple movement sent a dull ache through my every muscle. "You gave us all a scare. The healers said your body was simply depleted. You gave too much." I drank the water greedily, the cool liquid a balm to my raw throat. As I did, the events of the battle came rushing back. The shield, the arrow, Ivan's charge, and the final desperate assault on his mind. "Ivan?" I asked, needing to hear it. "Gone," Roman confirmed, his voice flat and hard. "The Blood Moon pack shattered without him. Most fled back to their own territory. We took many prisoners. The war is over, Amber. You ended it." The finality of those words was staggering. I looked at Roman, truly looked at him, and saw the profound weight that had been lifted from his shoulders. The haunted king I had first met was gone, replaced by a man weary but at peace. "The warrior," I said, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "The one who was hit by the arrow." Roman's expression sobered. "His name is Lycan. He lives. But the poison did its work. His wolf is silent. He's broken. The healers do not know what to do." The news was a somber counterpoint to our victory. I felt a pang of responsibility, a feeling that my shield, my power, had failed him. Roman must have felt my distress through the bond, because he gently took my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "This was not your fault," he said firmly. "You saved hundreds. You saved us all. Lycan's fate is on Ivan's head alone." For the next few days Roman rarely left my side. He became my tender nurse, a role so at odds with his savage reputation that it made my heart ache with love. He fed me broth when I was too weak to lift a spoon, his large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle. He told me stories of the pack, of his own childhood within these walls, filling the quiet hours with the history that was now my own. The pack's collective gratitude was a constant, warm presence at the edge of my senses, a gentle tide of acceptance and reverence that soothed my frayed spirit far more than any healing tonic. One evening, as I was finally strong enough to sit by the fire, he knelt before me, taking both my hands in his. "When I saw you collapse," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I felt a terror I did not even feel when I faced Ivan. What you did, the power you wielded, it was magnificent and it terrified me. The cost of it. It was the only way," I whispered. "He would have killed you." "I know," he said, his golden eyes searching mine. "But I would rather face 1,000 Blood Moon armies than ever risk losing you. You are no longer my weapon, Amber. You are the heart of this pack. You are the heart of my life." He leaned forward and rested his forehead against mine. There was no desperate passion in the gesture, no claiming fire. It was something deeper, quieter. It was the profound, unshakable solace of two people who had walked through the deepest circle of hell together and had carried each other out into the sun. The storm was over, and in the stillness we were finally, simply home. Chapter 17. The Weight of the Crown. When I was strong enough to walk, I did so with Roman by my side. The fortress was a hive of activity, but the frantic energy of war had been replaced by the solemn purpose of recovery. The sounds were of hammers rebuilding the gates, not the clash of swords, of healers chanting, not the screams of the dying. We attended the funerals, standing together as Roman spoke the ancient rites for his fallen warriors. I felt the pack's grief, but it was not the chaotic pain of battle. It was a shared, noble sorrow, a testament to the price of their freedom. My place in the pack had been irrevocably cemented. As we walked, warriors would stop and bow their heads, not just to their alpha but to me. They called me Heartwarden. Lyra, the she-wolf who had once been my tormentor, now led the patrols that scouted for the blood moon remnants, her gaze meeting mine with a look of fierce, unwavering respect. Roman brought me to a meeting of his war council. The last time I had been in this room, I had been an object of suspicion. Now the chair beside Roman's was mine by undisputed right. The topic of discussion was the fate of the blood moon survivors. They are scattered and leaderless, Kale reported, his arm in a sling. Many are starving in the woods. They are a danger, but a pathetic one. We should hunt them down, one of the older warriors growled. Exterminate them like the rabid dogs they are. Leave none of Ivan's line to threaten us again. A murmur of agreement went through the room. The desire for vengeance was a potent, understandable thing. But I could feel something else through my empathy, a deep weariness of the violence, a desire for a lasting peace. I felt Roman's gaze on me, a silent question. I took a breath and stood. Every eye in the room turned to me. For generations our packs have been defined by this cycle of bloodshed, I said, my voice quiet but clear. Ivan was a monster, but many of his people were victims of his tyranny just as we were. The females, the children, are they rabid dogs? Or are they just wolves who have lost their way, led by a sick alpha? I looked at the old warrior. If we hunt down and slaughter the weak and the leaderless, how are we any better than Ivan? True strength isn't just about winning a war. It's about what you do with the peace that follows. I turned my gaze to Roman. We can break the cycle. We can offer sanctuary to those who lay down their arms and seek a new life. We can build something stronger than a fortress, a kingdom built on mercy as well as might. The council was silent, stunned by my words. I had challenged a centuries-old way of thinking. I sat down, my heart pounding, unsure of how they or Roman would react. Roman was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, his regal presence filling the room. The Heart Warden speaks the truth, he declared, his voice resonating with absolute authority. The age of senseless vengeance is over. Send out the patrols. Any blood moon survivor who comes in peace will be given food and shelter. They will swear an oath to the Shadowfangs or be given leave to find a new territory. We will answer savagery with strength and hatred with a chance for redemption. This is my decree. It was a revolutionary moment. He had listened to my counsel not because I was his mate, but because he believed in the wisdom of my words. He was showing his pack and himself that his reign would be different. It would be stronger because it would be tempered by compassion. Later that day we went to the healer's wing to visit Lycan. The warrior was awake, but his eyes were vacant, filled with a terrifying emptiness. He stared at the wall, a man whose soul had been stolen. His wife sat beside him, weeping silently. Looking at him, my new purpose became terrifyingly clear. The war may have been over, but the battle for this man's soul had just begun. Chapter 18: Healing the Soul. The healing of Lycan became my sacred duty. Every day I would go to his chambers, Roman often by my side, a silent, watchful guardian. Lycan remained lost, trapped in the silent prison of his own mind. His body was healing, but the Crimson Sage had left a deep, spiritual wound that no poultice or tonic could touch. His despair was a cold, dead weight in the room, a stark contrast to the burgeoning hope in the rest of the fortress. Roman was worried I could feel it. He feared I would deplete myself again, that I would pour my own life force into a wound that could not be closed. You do not have to carry this burden alone, my heart, he said one evening, his hands gently massaging my tense shoulders. I'm not alone, I told him, meeting his gaze. But this is a fight only I can wage. My power was a shield for the pack's body, now it must be a balm for its soul. I knew that simply pushing power into Lycan would be like trying to fill a sieve. The poison had created a schism, a gaping chasm between the man and his wolf. I had to enter that broken space and guide them back to each other. It was a perilous thought to willingly step into a mind shattered by such a unique form of agony. The next morning I sat beside Lycan's bed. His wife and young son watched, their faces etched with a fragile hope. I took Lycan's limp hand in mine. I need you with me, Roman, I whispered. Be my anchor. He moved to stand behind me, placing his large, warm hands on my shoulders. I closed my eyes and reached out, not with a wave of power, but with a single delicate thread of consciousness. I plunged into the darkness of Lorcan's mind. It was a terrifying landscape. A howling, psychic wind blew through a wasteland of gray despair. In the distance I could see his wolf, a magnificent silver beast, but it was trapped behind a wall of shimmering sickly red energy, the lingering essence of the crimson sage. The wolf snarled and clawed at the barrier, frantic and alone. On my side of the wall was the consciousness of Lorcan the man, huddled and broken, deaf to the cries of his other half. I knew I couldn't shatter the barrier with force. That would only destroy what was left of his mind. Instead I had to build a bridge. Standing in that psychic wasteland, anchored by Roman's strength flowing into me from the physical world, I began to project memories. I didn't project my own memories. I reached into Lorcan's mind and pulled forth his own. I showed him the memory of his mating ceremony, the look of love on his wife's face. I projected the feeling of his son's small hand in his. I brought forth the exhilarating sensation of his first hunt, the wind in his fur, the moon overhead, the joyful chorus of the pack howling around him. I took these golden moments and wove them into a thread of light, pushing it against the crimson wall. The poison recoiled from the pure, heartfelt emotions. Slowly, painstakingly, a tiny crack appeared in the barrier. Through it, the man and the wolf saw each other for the first time since the battle. A low, mournful whine came from the wolf. A single, agonizing sob shook the man. For hours I worked, anchored by Roman, my own energy draining away as I held the bridge of memory and emotion steady. I showed them their bond was stronger than the poison. I coaxed them step by agonizing step closer to each other. The climax was a silent, spiritual explosion. Lorcan's human consciousness reached through the barrier of light I had created, and his wolf met him. They merged. The crimson wall dissolved into dust, and the gray wasteland was flooded with the light of a soul made whole. In the physical world, Lorcan's body convulsed. A great, shuddering gasp tore from his lungs. His eyes, once vacant, flew open. They were clear. He looked at his wife, then at his son, and a single word escaped his lips, a raw, choked sound of pure relief. Lyra. The fortress celebrated that night not for a victory in war, but for a victory of the soul. I was exhausted, but my spirit soared. Roman held me close, his eyes shining with a love and pride so profound it left me breathless. I had faced the ultimate poison and found the ultimate cure. Not power, but love and connection. I had truly earned my title. I was the Heart Warden. Chapter 19. The Spoils of War. Weeks melted into a season of peace. The last of the damage to the fortress was repaired, and the first green shoots of spring pushed their way through the thawing mountain soil. A contingent of the Blood Moon survivors, mostly women, children, and old men, now lived in a newly built section of the lower fortress. They were cautious and quiet, but their fear was slowly being replaced by a tentative hope. Lyra, to my amazement, had become their fierce protector, her sharp edges softened by the responsibility. The rhythm of our lives settled. We were no longer just warrior and weapon, but partners in every sense, ruling our growing kingdom with a united vision. But one morning Roman appeared at my door with 2 saddled horses, a mischievous glint in his golden eyes. "The council can survive one day without its king and queen," he announced, pulling me into a quick, breathless kiss. "Today is for us." He took me riding through the vast pine forests that carpeted the lower slopes of the mountain. We raced each other through sun-dappled clearings, my laughter echoing in the clean, crisp air. He led me to a place I had never seen, a hidden cove where a waterfall cascaded over mossy rocks into a deep turquoise pool. It was a pocket of impossible beauty, a world away from war and duty. We swam in the icy, refreshing water and lay on a sun-warmed rock, our bodies close. Here he was not the savage wolf king and I was not the Heart Warden. We were just Roman and Amber, a man and a woman deeply in love. "I used to come here as a boy," he said, his voice soft as he trailed a finger down my arm. "After Lara. I couldn't bear to. It was a place of too much joy." He paused, his gaze growing serious. "Coming here with you today, it doesn't dishonor her memory. Feels like it finally completes it. The pain is gone, Amber. You chased it away. All that's left is gratitude for the path that led me to you." My heart felt full to bursting. He was finally free from the ghosts of his past. He shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me. "I know that fate and the bond of our wolves have claimed us for each other, he began, his voice growing thick with emotion. But that is not enough. I, Roman the man, am asking you, Amber the woman, to be my wife. To build a home with me, to have children with me, to share every sunrise and every sunset for the rest of our lives. Marry me. Tears of pure happiness streamed from my eyes. Yes, I breathed, the word a mere puff of air. Yes, always yes. His answering smile was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He lowered his head and kissed me, a kiss that held all the promise of our future. It was a kiss of celebration, of unadulterated joy. That kiss deepened, passion igniting between us, hot and immediate. In that sun-drenched paradise we made love. It was not a desperate claiming or a gentle healing. It was a rapturous celebration of life. It was laughter and light, the joyful, shameless union of two people who had fought through the darkest night and had finally earned their dawn. It was the truest spoil of war, a love that was fierce, free, and eternal. Chapter 20. The Savage King's Claim. We were married in the heart of the mountain, in the sacred grotto where we had forged our first true weapon. The cavern was transformed. Instead of the tense energy of a ritual, it was filled with the soft light of 100 candles and the sweet, heady scent of mountain wildflowers. The entire pack was gathered in the tunnels outside the grotto's entrance, their presence a silent, powerful hum of respect and celebration. Inside, with only our closest counsel, Kale, a fully recovered Lycan and his family, and a humbled Lyra, as witnesses, we stood before the spring. I wore simple white robes, befitting the Heart Warden. Roman stood tall and proud in ceremonial black leathers, the Alpha King in his full glory. We held hands, our fingers intertwined. The ceremony was as old as the mountain itself. There were no priests, only the ancient truths. Taking a ceremonial dagger, Roman sliced his palm. I did the same without flinching. We then clasped our bleeding hands together, letting our blood mingle and drip as one into the pure waters of the spring. We spoke our own vows, our voices echoing softly in the sacred space. Roman spoke first, his golden eyes locked on mine, filled with a love so profound it was a physical force. You came to me as a captive, but it was you who set me free, he said, his voice thick and raw. I saw you as a weapon, but you brought my world a peace I had never known. My wolf claimed you as mate, but my soul recognizes you as its missing half. Amber, my Heart Warden, I claim you not as a king claims his prize, but as the earth claims the sun, for your light, for your warmth, for the life you have given me. Tears tracked paths down my cheeks as I spoke my own vow. I came to this fortress in chains, but in your arms I found my freedom. I thought my power was a curse, but you taught me it was a gift. My body betrayed me and surrendered to you, but my heart followed with a joy I never thought possible. Roman, my savage king, I accept your claim. I surrender to it freely, not as a captive to her king, but as a queen to her equal, a wolf to her mate, and a woman to the man who holds her entire soul in his hands. He sealed our vows with a kiss. It was a kiss of finality, of beginnings, of forever. At that moment, a sound rose from outside the grotto. It was the howl of the pack. 1,000 voices joined in a single joyous, triumphant chorus that vibrated through the stone, a wild symphony for their king and their new queen. Later that night, we stood on the balcony of our chamber. The full moon hung like a silver coin in the dark velvet sky, bathing our peaceful lands in its light. Roman wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my head as we looked out over the world we had fought for. The title of the story that had been my life replayed in my mind. I was his captive to be used as a weapon, but my body betrayed me and surrendered to the savage wolf king's claim. It was all true. I had been a captive. My body had surrendered. But it was not a story of submission. It was a story of becoming. The savage king was no longer a feared captor but my beloved husband, his claim no longer one of dominance but one of profound, all-encompassing love. And my surrender was not a weakness but my greatest strength, a willing, joyful fusion with the other half of my soul. I leaned back into his embrace, my heart full and my spirit soaring. I was home. I was loved. And I was finally and forever free.